It's about 2 minutes after 11. We are going to get started in the interest of everybody's time. My name is Tim Hayes. I'm the Executive Director of AIR CRE, and I want to thank you for attending today's town hall meeting featuring Kurt Strassman and our very special guest, Spencer Levy. Both Kurt and Spencer are with CBRE, and as everyone knows, CBRE is the largest commercial real estate services and investment firm on the planet. Today's town hall, titled Economic Trends in a Time of Uncertainty, is another in a series AIR CRE has hosted in the past few months as we work to keep industry professionals up to date and educated on the most relevant topics in a rapidly changing commercial real estate world. Today, Spencer and Kurt will discuss key economic trends from a global and national perspective, and then dial it in to focus on what is happening right here in Southern California, offering invaluable insights on current market conditions across all property types. They will also do a little crystal balling on what we can expect going forward. Before I introduce Spencer and Kurt, I want to touch very quickly on a few items. AIR CRE will be hosting additional town halls in the coming weeks. We are lining up industry experts to speak about what is happening on the lending side of the business, as well as the effect that current market conditions are having on property appraisals. We're also aiming to bring Matt Hargrove of CBPA back to speak about the split roll tax initiative that will be on California's November ballot. So please keep an eye out for communications from us on those town halls. As with previous town halls, this session is being recorded, and we will make that recording available on Monday. We will send you an email when it's up on our website, and then you can go to the website and listen to it again or forward it to your colleagues. As I mentioned earlier, if you have questions during Spencer and Kurt's presentations this morning, please use the chat box, and we will get to as many of those questions as we can at the end once they're finished with their presentations. I also want to thank Stephanie Plattner of Playa Creative Partners for all her help organizing these town halls. Without her involvement, it wouldn't be possible to put them on as well as we do. She has been working with AIR. Stephanie has been working with AIR CRE for the past 4 or 5 years on everything that we do with regards to marketing. So if you or your clients have any marketing needs, I highly recommend Steph and Playa Creative. As you can see on the screen, the topics that will be covered today are a macro view of the global economy and micro view of the US economy, short and long-term exposure and outlook for the different asset classes, a SoCal marketing overview. We'll take a hard look at retail and e-commerce and how supply chains are reacting to the COVID-19 disruption. And we'll also cover office space and see if that will ever be business as usual again. Now let me introduce our featured speakers. First of all, Spencer Levy is Chairman of America's Research and Senior Economic Advisor for CBRE, where he plays a vital role in the development and implementation of the global research strategy and business plan. He's a CBRE veteran of more than 10 years, overseeing the analytical activities of the CBRE research community. He is responsible for the management of more than 350 professionals who are focused on producing market-leading insight on the latest real estate trends. He also serves as principal external spokesperson on real estate issues and has considerable media experience providing market commentary for many national television, newspaper, and internet outlets, including Fox News, CNN, MSNBC, and Bloomberg. He is a much sought after speaker and has presented before NAIOP, ICSC, ULI, and CRE. And in 2010, he won CBRE's Gary J. Beeben Teamwork Award, which acknowledges professionals who take a multidisciplinary approach to client services. He's a graduate of Cornell University and Harvard Law School, sits on the board of the Harvard Alumni Real Estate and the Baltimore Leadership School for Young Women. And while a New Yorker for most of his life, Spencer currently hails from Baltimore and is a proud husband of 19 years and the father of 3 children. And he mentioned earlier that he is with one of his kids at Pinehurst right now. He got in 18 holes this morning and is going to play another 18 this afternoon, from what I understand. So I'm very envious of that. Mr. Strassman, Kurt Strassman, is the Executive Managing Director of CBRE's Orange County and Inland Empire operations, which includes leading a team of 500 professionals. He has direct oversight of all lines of business and services CBRE provides to the market. As the functional, industrial, and logistics leader, Kurt has the additional responsibility of managing approximately 150 industrial professionals throughout 12 offices. He also serves as the management oversight for CBRE's International Port and Logistics Group, which is made up of 50 professionals operating in 12 countries, and he serves on CBRE's National Tech Council. He's been on the AIR's board of directors since 2013. And for the past 6 months, I've had the pleasure of working with Kurt as he is the current president of this great organization. He's been married to his wife, Cynthia, for almost 30 years. Together, they have 3 children, and Kurt is an avid hiker and skier. And with that, Mr. Levy, I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you very much, and good afternoon. And so, as mentioned in the outset, I am here in Pinehurst, North Carolina right now at a hotel playing golf. And what's the relevance of that other than the fact that it's really cool to do after being in my house for 3 months? Because I think it really speaks to where I am from the big picture perspective. From a macro perspective, I have gotten feedback, positive and negative, of these last 3 months where I've spoken to well over 100,000 people. But the area I've gotten the most negative feedback is I've been too optimistic. The other area I've been gotten some negative feedback is how I've defended the future of office. But on the optimism side, why am I optimistic? Why have we been optimistic? And why do we stick to that forecast? Well, the Pinehurst thing really speaks to one significant element of it. It's called pent-up demand. And we're seeing tremendous pent-up demand, not only for drive-to hotels like where I'm at as we speak, but also for restaurants. And in China, we're seeing it for luxury goods. There is a tremendous amount of demand of people that want to go out and spend. And when you combine that with a massive amount of government stimulus from the PPP, from unemployment insurance and otherwise, and more that we expect, it will give us the fuel not only to raise the bottom, which is the expression I use in commercial real estate, but to propel us forward. So for the next couple of minutes, I'm going to define my comments into 3 basic categories. One is the macro. The second is the micro, what's happening in commercial real estate. And the third is the secular, the this time is different argument. What has changed or what will change as a result of COVID-19? So from the macro side, I already showed you my cards. I am in the optimism camp. And my optimism camp is based upon the fact that we're taking a look at China coming back faster than anybody's thought with manufacturing. All Starbucks are open. We are seeing an increase now in some durable goods orders, including automobiles and single-family homes. So things are going okay there. And the reason is this. They have implemented what we call the TTT approach, testing, tracking, and technology. They're using the same thing in Taipei, the same thing in Seoul, the same thing in Singapore. And we believe that that's going to be coming here. And that is what separates us from those who are more pessimistic, the U's, the L's, all the different letters in the alphabet we learned from watching Sesame Street as kids. Because we do believe the disease is going to rear its ugly head again in force in the fall. But we do not believe we're going to be headed to this massive level of national shutdown again because the TTT will be implemented. We already know it's being implemented by CBRE. We already know it's being implemented by most of our large occupier clients, which is what separates our V recovery from the so-called W or double dip scenario. Now, there is significant risk to the downside. In fact, our house model has the downside risk at around 40%. So that's about as high of a downside risk percentage as I've ever seen. But nevertheless, we maintain our house view that we believe the economy is going to decline about 6% in 2020 and rise about 6% in 2021. Now, even under that optimistic case, we're still at a net zero when we open the doors on 2022, 2 lost years. But nevertheless, that is way better than the recovery from the GFC, even better than the tech bubble. And why? Because this is a different type of phenomenon, because we're looking at different comps, because we see signs of optimism, as I mentioned, in China. Now, let's go micro for a second. In the micro case, we have to take a look at what's happening to commercial real estate. Okay. Now, most of the time, for the folks on this call who have seen me speak before, and I'm fortunate, I'm sure I've spoken to many of you, you know me as the long-term guy, the 3, 5, 10-year guy. What's going to happen? Well, I'm still that guy. But for the next couple of minutes, I'm going to be the 90-day guy, because the next 90 days are probably the most important 90 days in commercial real estate history. And how are we gauging them? Well, CBRE manages almost 8,000 assets in the United States, and we're tracking collections. And for the most part, collections have been better than we expected. Why? Government support has raised the bottom. And raising the bottom looks like over 90% collections in multifamily. It looks like almost 86% of collections in industrial. Looks like retail stabilizing. Now, the one area that is the question mark is office, which in April we collected about 86% of our rents, in May about 80% of our rents, but nevertheless, we believe we will get to bottom soon. And getting to bottom is essential because the number one thing that's missing in the market today is price discovery. People don't know what the asset is worth if they can't figure out what their occupancy is going to be, what are market rents. But when we get to bottom, we will get there. Now, here's the good news. I think we've already gotten to bottom in retail. I think we've already gotten to bottom in hotels. I think we've already gotten to bottom in industrial. And those will begin to creep back up from an occupancy, from a rent paying perspective, though we don't expect to see a material improvement in vacancy or rents until the first quarter of 2021. Nevertheless, we think we have gotten to that bottom. And that bottom really shows up in the scoreboard of capital markets activity. While CBRE's trades are down about 2/3 from where we were a couple of months ago, most of those trades are in industrial and multifamily. And we expect that to continue because there is getting closer to price discovery, but also the key factor being liquidity. Multifamily has by far the best liquidity in the market with the government-sponsored agencies, but industrial is a close second for everything except for spec industrial construction, where we are seeing some weakness in the capital markets. Now let's go to our forecast for a moment. Our forecast, we've broken it into a 1, 2, 3 scenario. 1, those asset classes that are coming back in year 1, which is multifamily and industrial. And as I mentioned, we think that 2020 is going to be a difficult year for both, though less difficult for those two asset classes than anything else. But we'll begin to bounce back in the first quarter. Now, not every industrial building or multifamily building is the same based upon market and sub-asset type. And we believe that big box warehouse industrial will bounce back faster than flex small bay industrial. And flex small bay industrial, which Kurt will talk more about in just a moment. The reason why it won't bounce back sooner is because everybody on this phone call that has a child or a grandchild has probably taken them to a jump house. You know where that jump house is? It's in a flex industrial building. They're not going to get tenants, or rather occupancy, at their peak levels again, probably for the next 12 months. But they will bounce back as we see them bouncing back better. And I'm going to give you the one big shout out. This is my drop the mic moment, Kurt. I don't even know why I'm going to say anything after. But I will tell you that the industrial forecast that we have at CBRE is better today than it was pre-COVID, because all of the mega trends from last mile industrial to cold storage to needing less just-in-time and more capacity to the possible reshoring of manufacturing means that both our rents and our occupancies are better 2 years from now than we would have expected at the beginning of the year. So there are no winners in COVID. It's been a terrible tragedy. But from a commercial real estate perspective, industrial will come out the best. Now, in our year 2 category, we have office. And I said from the outset, the 2 areas where I've been gotten beaten up the most is, number 1, I'm too optimistic. And number 2, a lot of people think people aren't going to go back to the office. Well, I'm not one of those guys, because we've been studying why people go to the office for years. And we've known for years, people don't go to the office because they need to go. They go there because they want to go to the office. And why do people want to go to the office? Well, they want to go there because it helps them attract and retain talent. It creates the culture that they want in their company. And the key, the absolute key, it makes people create the kind of soft skills you need to get ahead. There was one terrific study on work from home that I am aware of by Stanford University in 2015. And what did the study show? It showed that people can be more productive at home to create certain types of things, certain types of widgets. But is that real productivity? Because the people that they studied in that study were not in a collaborative type of trade. They also didn't need to coordinate with their colleagues. But 2/3 of the people in that study who elected work from home elected to go back to the office after the study was done. People want to go to the office for these reasons. And I think that people that bandy about the word productivity are using the word wrong. Productivity isn't just producing more stuff. There's a qualitative function. It is the quality of the things you're producing. And if you need collaboration and a culture in your company to do it, it's not going to happen working from home. And that's why we think that more people are going to go back than not to the traditional office. Will there be a more fluid workplace? You bet there'll be. There'll be more people working from home a couple days a week, working from the back of a Starbucks, a self-driving car. But the office will still be the key to working in the future. It'll be more well. And what does more well mean? Well, I have a client right there in Southern California, a company named McCarthy Cook, and they are building a terrific new office building in West Hollywood for $500 million. What are they putting in there? They're putting in hydronic HVAC, which means they pump hot and cold water into the floors and ceilings rather than putting in forced air to have cleaner air. I was just on the phone yesterday with Trammell Crow Company CEO, and they're talking about how they changed the design of a building to have more outside air coming in than having it circulate in the beginning. Wellness will rise to the same level that security rose after 9/11, that resiliency rose after Hurricane Sandy in New York, the 1985 Mexico earthquake. People will go back to the office. It will be a healthier, more well environment, and we'll see plenty of demand. Now, in the year 3 category, we see retail and hotels coming back. Now, as I told you from the outset, I'm sitting in the Manor at Pinehurst as we speak, and I'm teeing off in an hour. But the reason I'm here is because of pent-up demand. I can tell you that there's lots of people here who drove in from all over the place, and you're going to see more and more of it. Now I'm going to jump the shark right here, Kurt. I can't help this comment. But guess what? People are going to get back on cruise ships too, right? And I said that, oh, people aren't getting back on cruise ships. No way. Well, guess what? I'm going to quote a movie from the 1980s, Wall Street, where they said, greed is good. Greed works. Now, I'm not saying that greed is good, but I am going to say from an economic perspective, greed works. Because you know what's better than a cruise? A free cruise. And once they price these things down to the marginal level, people will get onto those boats faster than you could possibly imagine. And I'm already seeing people here in this golf resort that it can't get here fast enough. And we're going to see the same thing in retail and restaurants. Now, it isn't all wine and roses, because we know that there are different categories of retail where there's been a, quote, acceleration of trend. And not all those trends are positive. And the acceleration of the negative trends were secondary market malls, were many department stores. But there are many malls that are reimagining themselves. CBRE's office in San Diego is on top of a Westfield mall. It's fantastic. We moved from a suburban office building across the street, and we created a virtual live, work, play environment right there. Terrific office space, terrific project. That is the future, live, work, play, and you're going to see an evolution in many of these retail projects. Now, hotels, you are going to see challenges in both hotels that cater to international travelers and those hotels that cater to the business traveler. They're going to take a while to come back. As a matter of fact, there was a study that came out recently, which I'm happy to send anybody who sends me an email, that said, what is the most resilient market to COVID-19 and what is the least resilient? The most resilient was the Princeton to Trenton corridor, because they have a high concentration of both biotech, health, education. The least resilient, Honolulu, because they are so dependent upon international travel. But those markets will come back as well. But the drive-to hotels like the one I'm in right now will come back almost immediately. So let me sum it up like this. I am not blind to the issues that we have in terms of the flare-up in disease, and we have terrible other issues going on in the country now today, which certainly call into question our optimistic call. But we stand behind it because of the evidence and the facts on the ground we're seeing in China, the massive fiscal stimulus, and the fact that we believe that the federal stimulus so far has raised the bottom. And with that, I'm delighted to pass the local issues and industrial onto my good friend and colleague, Kurt Strassman.
Spencer, cruise ships. Okay, I'm looking forward to seeing that. Well, thank you, Spencer. Great job as always. I love hearing you. And so awesome. Hey, today I'm going to go through a few things. I'm going to go through some new AIR, which I'm really proud of the AIR and Tim Hayes and his whole team, because that comes from 1,650 professionals in Southern California. So it's some great information. Then I'm going to move into some CV stats. And then finally, I'm going to close it out with a few comments on just on a forecast. So this is coming from 1,650 professionals in the AIR, and I thought these were most relevant. And so this is since March, and let's, through the first quarter, I think all the fundamental, every stat from a revenue standpoint and volume and velocity was just off the chart. But since March, and this is in the greater Los Angeles and Orange County area, we have about 120 more listings on average than we did in the past. Now, since last year, from 1 year ago, it's 300 more listings. So it's quite a bit, and that's about 10 million square feet. So it's just starting to move, but not enough to move the needle. Our base, to give you relevance, is about 1.9 billion square feet. So 10 million square feet is not a whole lot. On a transactional volume, this is, again, per month from March. Prior to March, we were about almost 120 deals per month that the AR was tracking, that leases availabilities that was leased up. Since April and May, we're averaging about 76 deals a month. So it's down about 35, 40%. Then on a square footage model, prior to COVID, we were averaging almost 6.8, 6.9 million square feet of leases being signed per month. For April and May, it's about 4 million feet. So it's down about 45%. We saw a very sharp rebound though in May. April was probably the low point, and that kind of proves out in all the different fundamentals. Then when you look at lease rates have really not changed. In fact, in some cases, I'm going to mention later, they actually have gone up on new listings. But for the most part, lease rates have not changed whatsoever, and we've not seen that from both on the landlord side on availabilities and deal rates. Now I'm going to take it to the CB stats. Again, this is for our area. It's very consistent with AIR, about a 30% drop in total number of transactions from the first quarter to second quarter. But when you look at the vacancy rates, and granted, Southern California has some of the strongest occupied rates in the entire nation. And I'll just give you these to you real quickly. Los Angeles, pre-COVID, 1.7%. Today, as we stand, 2.3%. Virtually nothing. Orange County, 1.7%, 2.2%. So very nominal difference. And then listen to this, in the Inland Empire, that's a marketplace of 560 million square feet with 20 million square feet under construction. And it's been going over 20 million feet for the last 6 years. It went from 3.8%, believe it or not, our stats show 3.1% in a vacancy. It actually went down. On the availability rates, it's the same. There's been a lot of talk on sublease space coming available and what's happening there, but still it's very nominal differences. It's basically along the same ratios as I just described on the vacancy side, just very, very nominal increases. And then something's interesting, we study months on the market, the number of months that a building takes to lease. So in the greater Los Angeles area, it went from 4.3 months to about 4.7 months. Orange County, 4.1 months to 4.5 months. In the Inland Empire, from about 5 months down to 4.6 months. Really interesting, a common theme in the Inland Empire. It's really continuing to excel well. So you can see, even in the last 60 days, I would say April was the low point. May's been a big rebound. We don't have the final numbers for June yet, but it sure looks pretty good. So here's a couple comments for the forecast. CD study COVID on e-commerce adoption. And right now in 2019 ended about 15% of all retail sales were online. We have a prediction that through 2030, we anticipate 39% of all purchases will be online. This is pre-COVID. And pre-COVID, COVID was almost been the great accelerator for e-commerce adoption by all sectors of the society, not just the millennials, not just all the different people under the age of 60, but now ages 60 and over. And so our new models, we haven't come out with it yet, we think that we're going to hit that 39, 40% number by year 2027, 2028. And Spencer, you might add on that later on, but those are the numbers I saw. So what's going to happen in the short term? Short-term exposure. Certainly some of the smaller tenants are struggling because they're based on a localized economy. They don't have the deep that some of the larger companies have had. Obviously on the industries, non-essential consumer goods, if there's one sector, that would be it. Clothing, things like that. But the best positioned areas are really like our entire region, highly densified, big business infrastructure areas, core hubs that are populated, dense, that are set up well for e-commerce. And then basically the other hubs like the Inland Empire, Chicago, Dallas, and New Jersey. So we think for the most part, the big hubs will continue to do very, very well. The risk areas will be areas like Las Vegas has experienced some challenges, but again, it's based on a localized economy. And so areas like that. The general outlook, and I think Spencer made some comments earlier, we believe very strongly at CBRE that the industrial sector will actually come out stronger post-COVID than it went in. I mean, it's been the great accelerator. Certainly e-commerce and the 3PLs have really, really taken off on the absorption of space. Here's a couple more stats. So if you took transactions 50,000 square feet and under, through the last 2.5 months, we're down on average 37%. But when you look at transactions 100,000 square feet and over, we're only down about 5%. So it's basically, the market has continued to hum along pretty well. We talked about e-commerce. We think it's going to be the big accelerator, and COVID's been the big accelerator for that, and we think that will continue to expand. In fact, based on all those numbers, if you looked at 5 to 7 years out, if you went from 15% to call it 40%, that would mandate that we would need about 700 million square feet of additional industrial product. So again, it bodes very well. Secondly, I think most of us have read, because of disruption in COVID, for example, when you were going to buy toilet paper, hand sanitizers, there's big disruption. You could not get that product. So a lot of the users out there will look to increase their safety stock, and we have numbers up to about 5%, 3 to 5%. So when you add that up over the next 5 to 7 years, when that takes place, that's another 400 to 500 million square feet we're anticipating. And then lastly, there's been a lot of talk on onshoring. So for example, a lot of our pharmaceutical supplies were being imported back in from China. There's a lot of talk that will be reshored, and there's a number of other industries like that. Granted, that will take a longer term. We're anticipating that's 5 to 10 years out because it takes time. And certainly California may not be the big beneficiary, but United States will. So that's kind of the forecast in a nutshell. And I know we don't have a whole lot of time today, but I think from everything, all the basic stats and fundamentals, the industrial sector looks very, very good. It will continue to look good. We are hoping we've hit bottom, and appears from all the deal structures out there on lease rates and sale prices, the market has held up remarkably well. In fact, of all the sectors, obviously multifamily and industrial, boy, they've really been the shining stars so far. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Tim. Thank you.
Very good. That was excellent, both of you. So now let's take, we've had a couple questions come in on the chat box, but first we're going to get to the questions that were sent in during the week. And there's some questions specifically for each of you. So I'm going to jump back and forth a little bit. I'm going to start with you, Spencer. The first question is, what are we seeing as far as foreign investment dollars coming into the country as compared to pre-COVID, and where is that money going?
Well, all capital flows have slowed down internationally and domestically, for that matter, since COVID. But we expect that to reverse for 2 basic reasons. Number one, once international travel restrictions are lifted, people can visit these assets, particularly for larger assets. There's still a requirement for most international investors. They have to physically see the asset, so that's standing in the way. But the biggest barrier that has now come down to international investing is hedging costs. If we had this call back in November of 2018, it would have cost a European investor 350 basis points, 3.5% per year per dollar to hedge a euro dollar to the US dollar. That is now down by several hundred basis points because US interest rates have dropped so much. It's a similar story for many Asian nations as well. So while we have seen a short-term fall off because of lack of international travel, we think that we're going to see a significant spike in the fourth quarter because that's going to be lifted to some degree, but most importantly because the cost of capital coming in will drop.
Very good. Staying with you, Spencer, there's been some talk that there may be a reckoning of sorts, maybe in September, October timeframe, as some of the stimulus programs are ending, especially the one that where I think individuals can get as much as $600 a month on top of unemployment, and that's supposed to end at the end of July. So there's been some talk that once that money kind of runs out or dries up, we might see some real significant situations coming in September and October. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, if the shutdowns are going to continue, the government's going to continue paying unemployment benefits beyond that. I think that if there's anything that's black and white in government policy, that's going to happen. So I would say that the July or September timeframe is contingent upon opening the economy or not. If it's not open, unemployment will go beyond that. But from my point of view, what should be focused on now from a micro level is both that and PPP, because we think bottom has not been hit in multifamily yet because of the unemployment insurance, number one. Number two, in the event that we do not see more PPP, retail and hotels in particular are going to they're going to really suffer. So we expect additional PPP, but we also expect the potential for an additional liquidity mechanism. And so I've been in contact with all the major real estate lobbying organizations, and there needs to be, and we're lobbying for a bailout mechanism for CMBS in particular, where right now there's simply no solution but for a straight bailout of some sort. But as far as the macro, the mega bailout, or rather the mega stimulus packages, the Republicans have proposed a $1 trillion infrastructure package. The Democrats a $3 trillion package that would include state and local benefits. I don't think we're going to see either one of those things pre-election at this point. It's gotten ugly already, unfortunately. But the one exception to that is if we saw a major stock market collapse. I think that's the only thing that would spark a major stimulus package pre-election.
Very good. Okay, switching to you, Kurt. Here locally, we had a bill that was being pushed, SB 939, that in effect gave tenants the ability to walk away from commercial leases. That has sort of been put to bed for the time being. With that in mind, what are you seeing with regard to tenants and landlords working together to kind of weather this storm?
Tim, it sounds like you got some wind chimes back there. Anyway, hey, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of tenants that were anticipating a rental depreciation for a period of time. And I would say landlords across the board have held their rents very strongly. Now, they may have given up an extra month of free rent or some nominal TIs, but when you look at the straight fundamentals, I read off all those stats. The data points aren't there for landlords right now to reduce their rents. And so we are seeing deals moving forward. So initially, there was a lot of short-term deals, but I think you're seeing more and more people feel more comfortable making longer-term deals. So how they're working together, there's I read off the stats, there's a lack of supply still in our markets, and there's still very good demand. Granted, there's certain, it's fragmented. A couple sectors are a little bit more challenged. The smaller tenants are certainly going to be more challenged. But for the sizable transactions, I'm not sure if you want to call it a landlord's market, but it certainly looks pretty darn good at this point.
Very good. And I've taken care of the wind chimes. You have good ears. Going back to Spencer, what is your opinion of the recovery of the U.S. economy from COVID-19? We've heard talks about V-shape, L, U, W. Has anything changed over the last couple of months? And does this take into account a second possible wave of the virus?
Well, as I suggested from the outset, the fundamental difference between our point of view and the more pessimistic points of view, ours being the V-ish shape, I say ish because, how wide is the V, and the W, which is the double dip, it really comes down to testing, tracking, and technology. We believe strongly that the TTTs are going to come into place, and people are going to be able to segregate those people who are infected and protect those who are most vulnerable by the fall. You will see regional shutdowns. You will see some on a state but mostly from a local level, not dissimilar to what's happening now. It hasn't been a lockdown, but you're certainly seeing more stringent lockdown measures being taken in Houston and Dallas than are being taken in more rural areas of Texas. You're going to see the same thing in California. Do I see another statewide lockdown in California? Unfortunately, there's probably a higher risk of that in California than there is in other states, but you're going to see it mostly in the high density areas within California should the disease rear its ugly head, but it'll be short term. It will not be every person put into the same category. And so if you believe that, you should be in the V camp. If you believe that we're going to get into another massive shutdown situation, that's where you come to the W, but that's why we differ from the more pessimistic case.
Very good. One more for you. What are your thoughts on the seeming disconnect between the stock market surge of the last 2 months compared with the economic figures and forecasts?
Well, the stock market, according to Ben Bernanke, the former Fed chair's book, Courage to Lead, is the single most important economic indicator of all for both consumer and business confidence. And I agree with that. Even for the so-called Main Street consumer, it matters to them a lot too, because they have 401k accounts, and it's what's known as the wealth effect. If their 401k account goes down, they feel less wealthy, they're less likely to spend. That's why the stock market support should do. It's really important that it does well because it has a cascading effect on everything else. But the bottom line is this: is the stock market is forward-looking, not present-looking, not even past-looking. The past and the present don't really matter. What matters is the future. And so the future is much brighter during this downturn than it was in prior ones, in large part because there wasn't the destruction of the financial institutions like we saw in the prior cases. We didn't see any physical destruction you might have seen in a hurricane like you've seen in New Orleans or in Houston. And so some people have equated this to a hurricane without physical damage. And so I would suggest to you that and the most important thing is people just can't see it. $5 trillion, that's a lot of money. When I say a lot of money, that's a lot of money. The whole U.S. economy is $20 trillion. So 5 trillion divided by 20, that's 25%. And that hasn't even worked its way through the economy yet. There's still $2 trillion just sitting in people's bank accounts that hasn't been spent. So we've got rocket fuel. We have comps that show it's going to be faster. So the bottom line is we're sticking with the V, notwithstanding some of the negative evidence in front of us, and we're not blind to it, because I will tell you that our downside case risk is much higher than it normally is for our base scenario.
Excellent. Kurt, back to you. We've been hearing that the industrial sector, you just mentioned it, is, and especially sort of the e-commerce piece, is really thriving. I know that and you and I had a conversation yesterday where you mentioned that Amazon is snapping up everything they can get their hands on. Is that creating sort of a false sense of security as far as the numbers go and the vacancy rates and things like that?
It's certainly not at this point, because it's not just Amazon. It's industry and related companies that have a e-commerce component to it. Not every company is Amazon or 100% fulfillment, but it's certainly integrated on a broad basis across many industries. And so it's just, we had a very strong industrial market to start with, and it got a heck of a lot stronger with e-commerce. And these things, it's like a tide coming in. We do not see people decreasing their online purchases. In fact, the behavior, there's really been a behavior change on the due to COVID, where all sectors of society are buying because they had to buy, they had to adapt very quickly. And then when you couple that with the other factors we chatted about, there was a very severe supply chain disruption. And so companies are talking about increasing their safety stock or their inventory levels. So if you just take a small inventory level by an additional 5%, again, it's one more reason why they need more industrial. And that actually bodes very well for the Class B product. That's warehousing that can go into the Class B product. And then you couple that, there's been a lot of talk about nearshoring or reshoring, and we do think that will take effect. Now, granted, that will take some time, because those are big infrastructure capital improvements, and it does not happen overnight. And certainly California may not be the biggest beneficiary due to regulation, but there's a lot of states that will benefit tremendously from that. So there's multiple components in the tide moving into industrial. So I hope that answers the question.
Very good. No, great answer. Spencer, going back to you, stats have shown a significant exodus of people from densely populated cities like New York and San Francisco during this pandemic. Do you see this as a blip or the beginning of a long-term transition out of cities?
Well, I don't want to diminish it by calling it a blip, but I would say it's a short-term phenomenon. I think the next 12 to 18 months are going to be extremely challenged in the high-density areas, particularly because of the challenges of mass transit, number one, and elevators, number two. But once the disease is under control, people are going to revert back to more normal use patterns in high-density locations. And high density isn't just CBDs, it is live, work, play locations, period, like Orange County, where Kurt Strassman is sitting right now. Orange County is a perfect example of an urban-suburban market, a market that is suburban, but it has so many urban characteristics of live, work, play that makes it so attractive. In a similar fashion, you could point to Cambridge, Massachusetts. You can point to Silicon Valley. You can point to Cambridge. I mean, there's lots of examples of that. So, but people will go back. And the best example I can give, it's a terrible example to bring up because it's so tragic, but the 9/11 example of post 9/11, people were afraid to go back to the big cities. They were afraid to go back into tall buildings, but security got better. And we see a wellness revolution now that's going to match that that's going to make people more comfortable going back there. But let me just cut to the chase here. If you got a 25-year-old kid who just graduated from college or graduate school, do you think they want to work from home? Do you think they want to work in the suburbs? I think that question answers itself.
Kurt, can you speak to one of the questions that came in through the chat was, could you talk a little bit about rental rates, retail rental rates, and how much they have dropped, 10%, 20% or more? What are you seeing on that on your side, Kurt?
Well, I don't, you know, I'm not an expert in retail. I'll say that the retail side's very challenged. And Spencer, I think you have the stats more than I do. I think, you know, rents collections were in the 30 to 50% range. I mean, it's scary. I don't feel comfortable answering that question, Tim, because I just don't know enough. Obviously,
do you have any insight
Sure.
on that?
So retail rent collections all depend upon the type of center. Grocery anchored, obviously doing better than others. But then obviously at the bottom of the barrel is unfortunately second tier market malls and certain department stores, obviously. But here's what's going to happen with retail. It's going to continue to evolve like it has evolved for the last 450 years. You know what was built 450 years ago? The first mall. It was called the Turkish Market in Istanbul. And if anybody's been to the Grand Bazaar, that's what it is. And it's still there, but it continues to evolve as retail will evolve. People go to retail not because they need to. They go there because they want to, just like the office. Are we going to see some more market share taken by e-commerce? You are, but you're not going to continue to see hockey stick growth of e-commerce. As a matter of fact, you heard it here first. E-commerce sales are going to drop in 2021 over 2020. Bump. Now, that's not rocket science because people are going to go back to more normal use patterns. Now, will it be at a higher plane than it was? Absolutely, it'll be at a higher plane. But we're not going to continue to see that. You're going to see a little bit of a drop next year as it gets back, as retail continues to evolve and people are going to go back. But in the short term, you're going to see more percentage rent rather than fixed rent, particularly for restaurants and other places that cannot have the same level of density that they had before. But I think that's a short-term thing.
Very good. Kurt, I'm going to ask you this one because it came in for you. If you don't have the expertise, then we can throw it over to Spencer again.
Spencer's my default on everything.
What are your thoughts on the significant residential rent decreases seen recently in San Francisco and the Silicon Valley on the residential side? Do you think there's an expectation that we're going to start to see some of that here locally?
Spencer, take it away.
Sure thing. Once again, a short-term phenomenon. Next 12 to 18 months are going to be challenging. But no, as a matter of fact, locally, if you define locally as Orange County, no. As a matter of fact, what we're seeing in other large metropolitan areas, and again, it's unfair to call Orange County a suburb of LA. It's not. It's its own market. But nevertheless, those markets that are outside of the major markets are seeing a huge upspike of people that want to buy single-family homes, that people want to buy rental properties or move into rental properties in the short term to get out of the high-density cities. So I don't think the spillover effect from San Francisco or LA or New York to Orange County is going to mean that rents are going to drop in Orange County. Or I think, if anything, they're going to be more stable there than they will elsewhere. I'm not saying there isn't going to be downward pressure for the macro reasons related to COVID, but you're not going to see them fall for the same reasons that they're falling in the major cities.
Okay, Spencer, staying with you. This one says, the elephant in the room question: what effect will the November elections have on the global economy, or more directly, what effect does a Trump re-election have as compared to a Biden win?
Well, we're out of time. Thanks for having me today, guys. So let me answer it this way. So we've been studying presidential elections going back over 50 years, and the bottom line is this: putting all social issues aside, which I'm not touching, I'm just talking purely from an economic and real estate perspective. The occupant of the White House has less impact than most people believe on job growth and GDP growth. They do have impact on certain politically sensitive industries, such as healthcare, such as the defense industry, such as oil and gas. Those are the types of things that are going to have greater impact. But what I point to all the time, and now is my moment of glory because I've been proven right, local issues matter more than national issues for real estate. They matter from a property tax perspective, and I know that California is talking about the split roll taxes. They matter from an affordable housing perspective, that California is putting in things like rent control. They matter from a local property tax perspective, and many states are stressed from a pension fund perspective. Those are the kind of things that are going to impact your commercial real estate, not just directly, but indirectly, because when I talk to my big investors, I used the 3 T's before. Now I'm going to use the 3 D's: durable demand drivers. Now, California has many durable demand drivers, not the least of which being the sunshine tax. It's a pretty awesome place to live and always will be. But the durable demand drivers have to do with talent flows and demographic flows. And you can't hide the fact that the population in California has not been going up. It's going the other way, and people are going elsewhere. Same thing you're seeing in places like New York. And it's because there are certain factors there that make it less attractive. Those things need to stop, or you're going to have some longer term issues there. Now, that doesn't mean that LA and Orange County and San Diego and San Francisco aren't going to be fantastic places, because they are, because they have durable demand drivers in terms of talent, infrastructure, venture capital, culture. All these things just can't be replicated tomorrow in Phoenix, Arizona, even though Phoenix is a great place. The bottom line is that California has tremendous competitive advantages, but some of these durable demand drivers locally are going to be more important, in my opinion, than the results of the presidential election.
Very good. Okay, last question for each of you. Kurt, give us a California outlook for the next 12 months.
Okay, so I'm just going to speak to industrial. I think it looks, I've been very consistent in my thoughts that on the industrial side, I think for big box especially, I think it's going to be strong. The companies have proven they're continuing to do larger deals, and rents are holding up. And all the fundamentals I spoke about earlier. I think it speaks very well. On the smaller side, the areas that I would really watch myself, the small little businesses that are locally oriented without deep pockets. I think the small tenants under 20,000 feet, I think you keep a close eye on them, because when this money does run out, it'll be interesting to see whether we have another stimulus package that will help them. But those are the areas I think will be challenged. The one area I did not discuss with you that I think is exceptionally strong right now, remarkably strong, are the small buildings for sale under 30,000, call it under 50,000 feet. It is amazing. Pricing has held up and has actually increased. Now, I know some people will say that's due to the SBA program and the government program where they're paying a portion of the mortgage. But I'll tell you, that's been one strong market. The other sectors, I'm going to leave it to Spencer.
Very good. And turning it to you, Spencer, so your final thoughts and wrap up, and maybe a bold statement for the next 12 months.
My boldest statement is this: keep your chin up. And I'm going to just be direct with my friends in California, because I travel and I speak to everybody in the world. I mean, in the world. And there's a very different point of view on optimism about the strength of the economy and our ability to get past this crisis in places like California and New York than there are right here where I am right now in North Carolina and Texas and Georgia and other parts of the world that aren't as impacted by the disease. So my bold statement is, it ain't as dark as it seems right now. It's a lot brighter. We'll get better, and we'll get better sooner than you think, because not only is there optimism greater outside of places like California than inside of it, but the massive amount of federal stimulus, the pent-up demand is stronger than you could see, but you will see it. So keep your chin up.
Very good. Okay. Anything else from either of you before we wrap it up? And Spencer, we let you go get on the first tee there.
I'm going to beat my son this time.
I hope so.
Spencer, thank you.
Thank you.
To everybody on, thank you very much for attending. Once again, we will post the recording of this to our website on Monday morning. And then we will be in touch with you regarding upcoming town halls. Thank you very much, Spencer.
Thank you, Tim.
Thank you that was fantastic.
Thank you.
I really
Thank you,
appreciate
Spencer.
your time.